Welcome back in, everybody, to a Thursday edition of Birds 365. Off season is moving right along. I think we're down to 34 or 33 days. I'm already losing track of it as it all flows together. Johnny Mac, since I started hosting the show, you used to say it all flows together. Boy, I know what you mean. More now than I did. I mean, it all flows together. I'm on here. I'm on National Football Show every day for about an hour or so. It's all starting to flow together. Just 30-something days until they're at training camp, and we're all excited for that. Johnny Mac, let's dive into our hour two topics. Let's start with game number one. Green Bay Packers
The
in
Green
Sao
Bay
Paulo,
Packers.
Brazil. I think it's advantage Packers here just because of the expectation coming in for the Eagles. The Packers are the ascending team. It's in Brazil. I mean, I don't know why I feel that it's advantage Packers just from the not even any of the game stuff, just from the external factors here. But it feels like it's advantage Packers here. They're the away team. Eagles obviously lose a game at the Link to go and play in Brazil. What are you making of this first game? How are you viewing it from a 80, I think we're 78 days away now, 78 days out?
Yeah, I mean, I think the Packers are a good ascending young team, very young from a skill position perspective, and they are loaded with guys who can make plays. Um, down the stretch last season, we talked about the Eagles and how top heavy they are at wide receiver. It just seems like the Packers come at you in waves with these young receivers who are just athletic. Um, and they're not AJ Brown, Devontae Smith, but they got a bunch of them. So it's sort of like, um, it's one of the things I've been concerned about the Eagles. They have, the best one is never out there, Christian Watson. He's always seems to be hurt, but if he's healthy, he's a guy who's really difficult to deal with. Then I had, Romeo Dobbs and Jaden Reed, and even Bo Melton, who's from South Jersey here, Mays Landing kid, um, where I'm located. They had so many playmakers down the stretch last season. Obviously, it starts with the quarterback and Jordan Love. Somehow they've gone from Brett Favre to Aaron Rodgers and now Jordan Love. I'm not going to put them in that category yet, but last year looked really good as a first attempt at being a starting quarterback. They got a good tight end and Luke Musgrave. Now they brought in Josh Jacobs. It's interesting. I kind of wondered if you watch the Packers at the end of last season when they just boat raced the Cowboys, who were undefeated, by the way, at AT&T Stadium, and they just blew them off the field.
I mean, they really did. That's not an understatement at all. They throttled that team.
It was unbelievable, and the best player on the field that day was Aaron Jones, and they let Aaron Jones go, and I get it. He's 30. He was injured for most of last season. Then he came back at the end of the season, went on that incredible run, and they brought in Josh Jacobs, who's got the bigger, he had 1,600 yards a couple years ago, but he's coming off a bad season. And if there's that one thing where I look at the Packers, who are very much like the Eagles in the fact that they're a good organization, they generally make good decisions. I didn't understand that swap sort of other than, because Jones has been a very good player for them for a number of years. So it seems to be their Hassan Reddick. He's getting a little bit older. They're trying to swap out, get a little bit younger, get a little bit more of a shelf life. But boy, Josh Jacobs was bad last season for anybody who wasn't paying attention in Las Vegas. He had, I don't know, 3.5 yards per carry, something like that. And it's he's had a lot of touches, excuse me. The previous year, he touched it when he had his big year. He touched it 400 times.
Well, yeah, and going back to college, I know college is a different world, but the guy he ran the ball a lot in college too. I remember he was an Alabama guy. I watched every game. I mean, the guy was a workhorse in college.
Yeah, well, that's my concern. The similar
right.
with what I say the same thing with Saquon here. He's already Josh Jacobs. I'm just looking it up at almost 1,500 touches. almost exactly the same as Saquon Barkley. That's how much he's touched the football over his first 5 seasons in the NFL.
Is he already through
And
5 years, Josh Jacobs? I thought he was. Yeah, I guess you're right because he did the option year.
yeah, yep. Uh, Last year was his 5th season. And remember, so here it is, 2022, 340 carries, 1,653 yards, 53 receptions on top of it. So almost 400 touches. And then the next year, last year, 3.5 yards per carry. That's how quickly it happens for running backs. So I'm not as high on Josh Jacobs as they are. We'll see how that works out for them. Um, but overall, very good skill position talent, and defensively, they have some issues at linebacker too. Um, Interestingly, though, they've gone a different route. Quay Walker was a first round pick out of Georgia a couple years ago, and they drafted Edgerrin Cooper. A lot of talk about Edgerrin Cooper this year for the Eagles potentially as a second round pick. Well, they took him in the second round. They also got Xavier McKinney, who's a player the Eagles badly wanted to add, and they went really high to get him. And they drafted a safety in the second round, Javon Bullard. So they're going to get a lot younger. Jair Alexander is one of the best cover corners in the NFL. Rashawn Gary is one of the best pass rushers in the NFL. Good team. Very, very good team. A lot of it depends on Jordan Love from the perspective of, I talk about all these guys. Was he too successful last year? Is he going to wrestle? Does he think he
Right.
solved it? Because people are going to adjust to what he was doing well. And that's a big thing. Because if you kind of think, hey, I solved this thing, you're
Right.
going to probably take a step back. So a lot of it is going to hinge, as it always does, on the quarterback. But right now, if we're going off last season, the Packers were going straight up and the Eagles were going straight down. I'd have a lot of concern with that week 1 game.
Yeah, I think the one thing too about Jordan Love is that guy can thread the needle in a tight window. He is a great thrower of the football. What do you think of Matt LaFleur, their head coach down there in Green Bay?
Yeah, I didn't like Matt LaFleur for a lot of years, and I've had to rethink that. And part of it is
He's won a lot of games, John.
I know. Well, part of
Yeah,
it is you and I could have won games with Aaron
I
Rodgers.
know that's the big question with this comment with this evaluation of him as a
But
coach.
now you saw it again in what he was able to do last year. So I kind of changed, and I did my mea culpas on Birds 365 because look, anybody who knows this show knows how much respect I have for Aaron Rodgers as a quarterback. And I don't give a shit whether you like him or like his politics. I don't just stop with that nonsense. He's one of the greatest quarterbacks to ever live. Nobody's played the position at a higher level. When he's at his height, uh, he you know anybody could win with Aaron Rodgers at his height. And I blame not blame, but I put that into the context. Like, all right, he won a lot of games, but anybody would have won a lot of games under that circumstance. To take Jordan Love in his first year as a starter, have that run at the end of last season, you got to give him a lot of credit for that.
I think Slager brings up a good point. Just following up, it's really your point, but Slager does comment on it. Good point, John. In the same way the Eagles had too much pressure on them last year, I think there's a possibility that Love will be impacted by the higher expectations. I mean, you're 100% right, Slager. That's what Johnny Mack was saying. I mean, if you go and I've read a little bit of Packers blogs and stuff this morning. They're pretty high on this football team. They are remembering that thrashing of the Dallas Cowboys in the playoffs, which they should. I mean, I would, if I was a Packer fan and we got a new quarterback in here coming out of the Aaron Rodgers era, I'd be pretty pumped with a thrashing over the Cowboys like they did because they really destroyed that team. But you're right. I mean, they might have expectations that are making things harder to live with. Bigger expectations mean you have to do better and be more, and it's tougher to live with when you have those, especially when you're a young quarterback. And as Johnny Mack pointed out, they will shift. They will adjust to Jordan Love and playing him. So we'll see. We'll see how that goes. John, before I move on to the Falcons, I know we already did our win-loss thing. You think this is a loss for the Eagles?
Green Bay?
Yeah.
Yeah, I had it as a loss, right off that. Not saying they can't win the game, but I do think the Packers, kind of had the momentum coming off of last season. The Eagles didn't. The Eagles have all the change. I think there's going to be some growing pains when it comes to the Kellen Moore offense. Don't be surprised with that. Um, I think you've already seen it in minicamp. I think that'll continue until early in the regular season. Um, so I think, the Packers are probably better equipped to hit the ground running uh, with a little bit more continuity. And, they have a lot of talent too. I don't think they're, you know, maybe not as well known as some of the Eagles star, as I said, but if anything, they have more playmakers that can make plays. Because they're so deep at wide receiver. Um, they're deeper at tight end. As I said, I don't love the running back move because I'm a big Aaron Jones guy. Um, but yeah, I'm not going to sit here and say Josh Jacobs is a bad running back. He had a bad year, but for all the Eagles fans that get on me about Saquon Barkley, well, then you can't point to Josh Jacobs' bad year and say he's terrible because you got that guy in the Hall of Fame, a lot of them, Saquon. So Josh Jacobs has proven.
You are right there. Those stats last year are a little bit concerning, and just the sheer amount of touches. That's a
Yeah,
lot.
I don't like it. I don't.
Yeah,
I
I
don't.
don't.
I don't. I don't. I don't like the move, and mainly, like I said, Aaron Jones was just unbelievable in that Cowboys game, and he is the best receiving back in football, not named Christian McCaffrey. That's the guy who's number 2 as a receiving back. But he's getting older and he's got a lot of injury history, so I get it from that standpoint. But he was really difficult to deal with because he could catch the football down the field, and that made him even more difficult to deal with.
They're coming in. They didn't lose any coordinators or anything, right? Last year, the Packers. I don't think they did. I don't know though. I can double check.
Matt LaFleur is the offensive coordinator,
Yeah,
so
he's right.
It doesn't count. Adam Stenavich is
yeah, I'm more meant for just the continuity aspect, just because I think the Eagles are a better team than the Packers.
They changed their defensive coordinator. They went with, and I'm trying to look at, they went with a college guy, which was kind of weird, kind of a weird hire from Boston College as the head coach at Boston College. I forget his name. I'm trying to look it up. Jeff Hapley. So that was kind of weird. They were, they had a really bad linebacker situation. Not that not that they're the only team. We obviously see it with the Eagles as well. A lot of teams just don't invest in linebacker. The ironic thing is they've invested. Quay Walker, as I mentioned, was a former first round pick, not former. I got to stick in the swear chart. I screwed up my own pet peeve, Xander. 2022 first round pick, Quay Walker, hasn't really lived up to the billing. And they drafted Cooper this year, Edgerrin Cooper. So, but when I talk about those guys in theory have a bigger upside than the Eagles linebackers. So even though they haven't proven it, but yeah, Jeff Hapley is the defensive coordinator, and that's kind of a weird hire, to be honest. So I'm glad you brought that up because that might hurt the Packers at least early in the season.
Yeah, well, because that's the one evaluation I would give for the Packers offense is that they have continuity now coming into the year versus Jalen is, as you mentioned, 95% new. There's a whole, and I think there's going to be a growing pains, not crazy, but I think there's going to be some growing pains, with the start of the season for the Eagles. So we'll see. we'll
Yeah,
see
and Joe Barry was the old defensive coordinator, and he was running a Fangio-like scheme as well, like so many people, and he was not successful with it. So, they probably kept him a little bit too long, but yeah, I would have went in a different direction than Jeff Hapley. So I think that might help the Eagles.
Yeah, so let's move on to the Falcons before I do that. Richard Natinsky checking in from Wildwood. Wildwood days. I love that. I love that spot we play on the channel. So shout out to you for being here from Wildwood, and shout out to Wildwoods, a great sponsor of the show. Thank you to the Wildwoods for sponsoring here on Birds 365, and shout out to you, Richard, for being here this morning. We appreciate that. Johnny Mac, Game 2, Atlanta Falcons. I think this is a sleeper game. This is a tougher opponent than I think people are giving credit for. Kirk Cousins is a good quarterback. He throws the ball well. They got a lot of speaking of pass catchers, speaking of young playmakers, speaking of skill position guys, they got a lot of them. They got Kyle Pitts. They got some good receivers. They have, Bijan Robinson. For once upon a time, this was Bijan 365. What do you think of the Falcons? How are you viewing this game going into the year?
Yeah, a lot of it depends on Kirk and where he is health-wise. I know he's down at tight end university. He's jacked up. I know he's in good shape. I don't know if
he recovered from that injury, Kirk.
Well, he's out there helping the tight ends. So and he was working in mini camp, so he's close to being cleared if he's not completely cleared for contact. But he is 36 years old or whatever, coming off an Achilles, so there's got to be some concern about what he's going to be from a health perspective. Eagles fans should know. He has gouged the Eagles from a passing perspective multiple times now. The Eagles usually beat them as well. So, who cares if you throw for 400? But that might be one of those games where people are, the Eagles win the game, but people are shaking their heads because the Falcons got 350, 375 passing yards, 3-4 touchdowns, and the Eagles win the game because they score more. But yeah, they're going to be, if Kirk is healthy, they're going to be explosive offensively. You can argue their backup running back, Tyler Algier, was probably more effective than Bijan, at least as a runner. But
that's a good player, that Tyler Algier. I like that kid. He's a good player.
And they still have
college. What did he play? BYU. He played BYU.
BYU, yeah. And obviously Bijan is very talented, very gifted. Kyle Pitts, very gifted. Hasn't lived up to what people expected, but now that he has a high volume thrower, who knows? And Drake London,
Ray McLeod too. They got don't they have Ray McLeod now?
Yeah, they have Ray, but Drake London's probably their wide receiver one.
Yeah, definitely. I think
will be, and he'll be better.
Added that could make an impact. Where did Ray play? Before there was Pittsburgh and San Francisco. Yeah, Pittsburgh and San Francisco. So I think he's going to have a bigger role, or at least the opportunity.
Well, they signed Darnell Mooney. They gave him a bunch of money to be the number 2 receiver. And they traded for Rondell Moore from the Cardinals, who's explosive as well. So they have a good slot receiver in theory. They're another team that you say, whoa, they got a lot of skill position talent. And the offensive line is better than it has been. Chris Lindstrom, Caleb McGarry developed into really good players. They have everything to be successful offensively. I think the issue with them is going to be defense. They've struggled with the pass rush for a number of years. I think that continues. There's no obvious, that guy's going to be a splashy pass rusher. So I think they're going to struggle defensively. They're going to have to outscore people. And I think they'll be capable of it, but they're going to give up some points as well.
Yeah, they're one of those teams, in my opinion, where it's like, I don't think they're a better team than the Eagles at all, but it's like an any given Sunday type of thing. They're a team. They got talent. They have a quarterback. I bet you, John, those receivers down in Atlanta are licking their chops, because look at what kind of money Justin Jefferson just signed for. Now, Justin Jefferson's a
Yeah.
great player, but you're only as good as the vehicle getting you the football, and Kirk Cousins can get the football out with the best of them. So I think those receivers, Drake London down there, Ray, we talked about Ray, even Kyle Pitts, I bet you they are all licking their chops to get that ball, trying to have a big breakout year. So I think the Falcons are a sleeper team. Their roster is not nearly as good as the Eagles, I don't think, but I think they are a team that could, any given Sunday.
They got a boatload of first-round picks on offense. So if you go the Eagles pedigree scouting way, Drake London's a first-round pick, Jake Matthews, Chris Lindstrom, Caleb McGarry, Kyle Pitts, Bijan, all first-round picks. All first-round picks. Yeah, they got a lot of talent on offense. We'll see how it shakes out. But if the quarterback isn't healthy, and that's a serious injury at his age, so we have to see how that shakes out. And they drafted a quarterback in the top 10, which may have been the goofiest decision ever, but there you have it.
I for the life of me, like, I know it's been beaten to a pulp by all the national media since the draft. Why the heck do you do that? You sign Kirk. I mean, you have a chance to compete this year. Go and get a player. If they pick it, I mean, really, I don't even think he was a good first round. It'd be one thing if they drafted a guy I thought was going to be great. Like
if they get it right and he turns into a long-term starter, that's all that matters. But yeah, they overdrafted him.
That means you made a dumb decision in Kirk. So one way or the other, it was a dumb decision. That cemented one of the decisions is going to be dumb no matter what. So it's an interesting move.
Yeah, interesting to say the least. I
guess they're trying to Jordan Love him a little bit, right? Put him on the bench for a few years.
Yeah, they're going to put him on the bench, and hopefully if he develops down. But I think they overdraft him. And if you want to do that, trade down, do something else, get something, manipulate the board, do your job as a GM.
We can't relate to that here in Philadelphia because we have Howie Roseman. I mean, Howie Roseman doesn't get burnt like that. I mean, he might pick a wrong player. People will
say that. I mean, it's easy to say, well, if he develops into a long-term starter, as I just did. But even in that, even if that's the best case scenario, you still overdrafted the kid. You didn't have to draft him there. You didn't get the valuation out of the spot. And I think nobody's going to disagree with that sentiment.
Yep. So we'll see. John, game 3, which is an interesting one, the New Orleans Saints. This is where I'm a little different with you. You like this team. I think they have good talent. I just don't like.
Well, I'll tell you why. And I'm not. They're the exact opposite of Atlanta. Atlanta's got all the skill position, all the splashy guys, and everybody thinks they're good because of their offense, and they don't have a defense. The Saints have a defense, one of the few teams in the NFL where you can say, all right, they're going to be pretty good defensively. Everybody else is sort of like, I use that baseball relievers. You may have a good year, you may have a bad year. It's the Eagles. They had a good year in 2022. They had a bad year in 2023 on defense. There are very few consistent defenses from week to week in this league. Baltimore probably being the most notable. The Saints are good on defense. They're good. I don't know what they're going to do on offense. I don't love Derek Carr. They're fighting with Alvin Kamara, who's a declining player anyway. Chris Olave is a good player, but they don't have much other than that. The offensive line's just okay. They're not going to scare anybody offensively when it's an offensive-driven era, so people think they're bad. But they're going to win games because they can stop people. Their secondary is in the conversation for being the best in football. Their linebackers, I talk about Demario Davis all the time. He's getting older, but man, he's an old school, beat you up, tough. Bobby King would love that guy. I'm sure he does love him. Willie Gaze, their other linebacker, who's a playmaker. Pete Werner's a good linebacker. They got linebackers coming up the Yahoo for an organization that we have to follow, the Eagles, that doesn't give a rat's ass about linebackers. And then, their defense up front with Cam Jordan is also a little bit aging, but keeps playing at a high level. They're just really good defensive.
Who's their defensive coordinator?
Well, Dennis Allen's a defensive
Defensive
head
minded. Yeah,
coach,
right.
so he's pretty much running it, but Joe Woods is their defensive coordinator. Um, so, it's one of those things where it's
Yeah, it's
really
one of
Dennis
those games.
Allen's.
If they have the advantage and they can slow our offense down, which you are right. I mean, that's a good defense. They got a lot of players there. That could potentially be a game that I guess gets close if they're able to slow down the Eagles' offense. But I just don't see them being able to hang with us for a full four quarters. So we'll see how it goes. Johnny Mac, before we move into the Bucks and then finish up Saints, I want to go to D Love, a super chat. D Love, thanks, brother. We appreciate you being here. We appreciate the super chat. Anybody that has questions for John, I'm going to answer them. Super chats go to the front. So thank you guys. And thank you, D Love, for the super chat. He says, does someone like Tyler Hall make the roster, considering he is their only pure slot corner besides Maddox? Maybe Cooper, you can say, but he's a rookie. It's a good point. I mean, they don't really have a pure slot corner. I just don't think Tyler makes it because of the amount of bodies in the room. John, what say you?
Yeah, I think he's an under. I wouldn't say he's going to make the team, but I wouldn't dismiss him for that reason. He's a natural slot corner. Avante's history. Um, I don't think Avante's versatility and the ability to also play backup safety, I think helps Howie keep an extra cornerback on the roster. So it might come down to Eli Ricks or Tyler Hall. And if it comes down to that, how much do they really, really like the long term ability of Eli Ricks versus having that comfort level in the slot after what they went through last season? Maybe that changes their philosophy. Because last year they kept Eli Ricks because they thought he could be a long-term starter at outside corner, and that's just more important. But now they have Ringo and Mitchell and DeJean, um, and even Isaiah Rogers, all these guys. And then you bring up, pinch comes to shove, yes, Cooper DeJean is not a natural slot corner, but they think he can play the position. Isaiah Rogers is playing outside, but they think he can play inside if they need him, even Quinyon Mitchell. So they have a bunch of guys this year they feel more comfortable in a pinch moving inside than they did last year. That to me hurts Tyler a little bit. But I wouldn't sleep on him making the team. I think he's a legitimate candidate to be on the 53. So I wouldn't dismiss him, but I wouldn't say he's a lock by any stretch either.
Yeah, great question there by D Love. Somebody that's kind of getting slept on, and he looked pretty good as well in spring football, didn't he, Johnny?
Yeah, he did. Just got overshadowed by the bigger names, but he played well and I try to throw him in that conversation of the corners that played well. And this is all dependent on James Bradbury leaving as well, because if James is here, which I don't think he will be, but if he is here, that's going to really hurt some of those guys on the bubble.
D Love, thank you for the super chat, man. That was a great question, Johnny Mac. I thought gave you a great answer. So we'll see what happens with Tyler Hall. Let's go to one more super chat here from James Carver. That's right, Zach McPherson. Johnny Mac, Zach McPherson. He did an interview, or Zach, I guess I always call him Zach because it's Z-E,
Yeah.
But Zach, whatever.
It
Zach,
is Zach, but it's
thing.
spelled Zach.
Yeah, it's spelled Zach. So I call him Zach. He's Zach in my eyes. I'm Xander. He's Zach. All right. People overlook the fact that McPherson played slot a ton at Tech and loves to hit. His interview the other day with Mott, yeah, he was on with Thomas Mott, Johnny Mac, even said he's working to play slot in 24. Yeah, we'll see. I don't think it looks good for Zach. I think it's
no, nice guy too.
great guy. There's too many bodies, right? I mean, it's a
Yeah.
numbers game, and I just don't see it. I don't see him. I don't see the spot for him on the roster.
Yeah, it's a shame last year because I think it all started. I think week 2 Avante Maddox got hurt tore his pec, but it all started in the preseason because Zach was going to be the backup slot corner, and he tore his Achilles against Baltimore in the preseason, and the revolving door started, and the Eagles just couldn't close it. and had all the issues. And yeah, I mean, unfortunately, since that time, you have all these additions, and they're pretty high profile additions. If you think about, a first round pick, a second round pick, Isaiah Rodgers has got starting experience in Indianapolis coming back from his gambling suspension. Tyler Hall is a free agent, even. You have all these meaningful additions, and Zach still wasn't cleared to participate fully in the minicamp and the OTAs. So it's a large hill to climb, to put it mildly. I do think he's an NFL player, though, and I think he's one of those guys who, who knows? He might be back on the practice squad. Now you can put veterans on the practice squad, but for the 53, very unlikely, I would say, unfortunately. Good kid, great guy. Disappointing injury timing. He was going to get a shot to be, a meaningful backup last year, and he got hurt. Sucks.
Yeah, we'll see how it is. James Carver, thanks for checking in, brother. We appreciate it. He clarifies. I just think Zach makes it before Hall was my point. Sadly, I think he's going to another team. Yeah, we'll see. I mean, a lot of bodies like that. This is the reality of the NFL. Sometimes, I mean, on one hand, we're all excited about all the young talent on the team. On the other hand, you're going to lose some guys. I mean, you just can't keep them all. There's just not spots for them all, and they're valuable pieces. And Howie will probably shake and bake, maybe move some of them, or they just won't make the roster, and they'll get cut and get picked up on waivers, or make a practice squad somewhere else. It's just the nature of the NFL. So thanks for those two great questions from Carver and from D Love. We appreciate both of you guys. Appreciate everybody being here. Make sure you guys drop a like the show, and then one more programming reminder coming up in 22 minutes. Big Sills at 10 a.m. Big Sills, everybody. Get ready for Big Sills coming right out of Birds 365. He will have a shortened show today, just 2 hours. So 10 a.m. to 12 if you're in the Eastern time zone. 10 a.m. to 12. Big Sills will be on coming right out of Birds 365. So we will do that. Sorry, that is my fault. I have a wedding to attend later today for my first cousin. So a big day in the family. And then I will be out there. Hopefully I'll be back tomorrow. Johnny Mac, I'm going to be on the show tomorrow morning. I'm going to be seeing 3 of you. It's like the Rocky movie. Hit the one in the middle, right?
Yeah.
I'll be talking to the one in the middle, but I'll be back in the morning, hopefully in good shape for Friday's edition of Birds 365. Johnny Mac, let's move into I thought we gave a pretty good breakdown of the Saints. So they're going to be a good team. They got a good defense. We will see how that goes. But let's move into the final game before the bye week. Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Bad blood in the mouth of Philadelphia after that thrashing in the playoffs. They've now thrashed us twice in the playoffs in the last 3 years. One with Tom Brady, one with Baker Mayfield. What do you make of this game?
Yeah, the Eagles should be used to going to Tampa by now, but I don't know how they lost to that team last year. So I would hope that there would be some kind of revenge factor to want to prove they have more talent than Tampa. But I mean, they got waxed. They weren't even close, which tells you how bad things went off the rails last year. I'm not particularly in love with the Tampa Bay offense. The quarterback is somewhat limited. They don't have an explosive running back in Rashad White. The receivers, even though they were making plays, I mean, Mike Evans he's going to the Hall of Fame, but he's getting older. They're letting Trey Palmer make trades. I know they brought in Sterling Shepard. The offensive line, Tristan Wirfs, a very good player, but other than that, they did get Graham Barton, who's going to be their new starting center. I would think day one. I'm very high on him. I think he's going to be a really good player. Vita Vea been tremendous, maybe the best pure run stuffer in the NFL. Antoine Winfield Jr., one of my favorite players, maybe the best safety in the NFL. So, but the Eagles should beat that team. They should have beat that team last year. They should beat that team again. They did beat that team. Remember how badly they beat them early in the season in Tampa. And by the when they went back, they were so shot mentally and emotionally. They didn't show up. It was an embarrassing defeat. But they're a better team than Tampa Bay, and they should prove it. But if you're not playing with confidence, things can go. You saw it last year. Things can go drastically wrong because everybody can beat you in this league. I say it all the time.
Yeah, there's good players all over the league. Yep.
Yeah. But I'm not tremendously high on Tampa Bay. I think they got some issues, and yeah, just emphasizes how disappointing that playoff loss was last year because they, going into that game, I was like, they're not going to lose to that team, even on the road, and they didn't. They not only lost, they got their what's handed to them.
Yeah, it looked really bad. I've said many times on the National Football Show with Dan Cilio coming up at 10 o'clock this morning, special edition of his show. But I've said many times on there, that game had the opportunity for me as a fan of the team to completely wipe out the slide at the end of the year, right? You go into the playoffs, it's a new life. You're 0-0 again. You're undefeated. Go into the playoffs, win a game versus Tampa. Like, I thought they got the good first round matchup. They got the matchup they wanted to get. And they just looked like a limp dog out there. They just had no fight. There was no will to win. They just looked terrible. I thought Jalen looked terrible. It was really embarrassing, as Bruce puts it in the chat. It really was an embarrassing loss. And that, to me, cemented why, it cemented this offseason of talk that we've had, just trying to rehash what the hell happened to the Philadelphia Eagles in 2023. I thought they could have corrected the narrative pretty easily by just winning a playoff game and looking like they cared, and they didn't.
Sua's down there. Maybe that turns to Suho Pettis signed with Tampa Bay. And, of course, the Eagles have Devin White, so maybe there's a big revenge factor for Devin White.
Is Sua ascending like the Tesla stock that Jason Kelsey called him out?
No. He is firmly entrenched as a backup. But, he's a good backup. No problems with that. Yeah, I don't know. I'm not a big fan of the quarterback and the running back. And NFL wise, obviously Baker Mayfield can make some plays and be. Again, we're talking about this. This is not college. These are NFL teams. So you're going to have to deal with good players, and you're going to have to deal with the Antoine Winfield Juniors and the Vita Veas and be able to win. But if you're looking for a consistent team, I don't think Tampa Bay can be that at this stage. But yeah, that was a disappointing loss. And I don't know who called it embarrassing, but an Eagles exec did you one better, because in the third quarter, he said, fucking embarrassing, after the 77th missed tackle, I think, of the game.
It really was. It was, geez, I don't even want to think about it anymore. But Lou hits the nail on the head for me. This was exactly how I felt about the game. It was as if they were just trying to get to the offseason. They just quit. It's really what it looked like. And I said to you, Johnny, a couple weeks ago, I sit in here in my studio. I got a little studio here. I have a TV up on the wall there. I keep on NFL Network for the most part in the offseason, just because I'm not. I like other sport. I'm a big hockey guy, but other than that, I mean, I like baseball as well. I like the Phillies and stuff. But I watch NFL Network in the offseason. I love all things football. And they replayed that game, and I sat here. I sat right there after this show one day, and I didn't move. I rewatched the game like it was just on, and it re-angered me. I was like, it looks as bad as I remember it
when I was going to Tampa, I say all the time, I was laughing at people that said Nick Sirianni was going to lose his job, and I was saying, come on, stop it. And coming back, I was like, well, maybe. That's how bad it was.
Bad, man. It really looked bad. Dad says he turned it off. Only 2 games I turned it off were both Tampa games. That, and I imagine the Tom Brady playoff game, where that was Jalen's first playoff game. He did not look good in that game. Bruce says, I was at the bar ready to throw hands for the Eagles. I'm with you, Bruce. That was an ugly, ugly game. But anyway, John, that's your first 4 games for the Eagles in 2024.
First quarter.
First quarter, right? First quarter of the season before the bye week. They got the early
Can't
bye
say
week.
that anymore, though, because they made it 17 games. Thanks, NFL.
Yeah, right. It used to be a perfect quarter. Now it's about 23% or 22% or whatever it is, right in there. I don't have the math on the top of my head. Yeah, Lou, he says I never want to rewatch it. Lou, I do not recommend rewatching that game. It was brutal the first time and brutal, even more brutal potentially the second time. But John and everybody in the chat, I'd like you to chime in on this as well. But I want John to be the voice of reason as we are all fans here. What's a realistic record to be through those 4 games without being like, holy shit, time to sound the alarms type of, if they're 1-3, I think you're going to be at sound the alarms.
Yeah.
What do you think it's realistic?
I think 3-1 is good. 4-0 is obviously a home run. Then you're starting to think, all right, the Eagles are back. 3-1, I think, is perfectly fine. 2-2, I think, is understandable. 1-3 is, sound the alarms. Obviously, 0-4. They're not going to go 0-4, but 0-4 would be, fire the head coach right away type of thing.
Yeah, I think.
Which I don't think Jeffrey would do either. But those are kind of the levels. I expect him. I expect some struggles early in the season. I think they're going to not be as good as people expect early and be, starting to hit their stride late. And I think I had them at 2-2 through the first 4 games, which I don't think would be great, but it's not the end of the world because I do think there's going to be some struggles. Learning Kellen Moore's offense and getting everybody on the same page and getting everything up to speed. Plus all the young defensive backs, a lot of change on the defensive side as well. Not from a scheme perspective, but from a talent perspective. And I think they're going to be better in the second half of the season than the first half of the season.
Yep, me as well. So we'll see how it all plays out. Johnny Mac, let's go to our final commercial break. We only have I'm going to go to 57 or 58 today on the show, 9:58. So we'll end a couple minutes early just because I got to get ready to get Dan up right at 10 a.m. I got a busy day, so I got to move this stuff along so I can try and make myself look somewhat presentable for the wedding this afternoon for my cousin. Obviously a weird time for a wedding. Don't ask me. I didn't plan it. I didn't book it. I just got invited and I have to be there. So I'm a part of it. So let's get to our commercial break. I want to thank everybody for being here this morning. Pretty good viewership on this Thursday, June 20th edition. We appreciate you all being here watching us in the off season. Just 30 something days. I think it's 34 or 33 until the Eagles report for camp. And then I know it's 78 days until the Eagles are on the field in Sao Paulo, Brazil. 77 days until the NFL kicks off that Thursday night with that good Thursday night game. So it's coming, Eagle fans. It's coming, and it will be here before we know it. So, boy, am I excited for it. I think Johnny Mac's even getting excited for all this off-season talk. One more super chat before I hit the break. Johnny Mac with OTAs, 95%, et cetera. Have you reevaluated your stance on the early bye after 4 games?
No, I never like an early bye. I mean, that's I don't. Early buys are not good in general. I mean, you're going to get banged up, and it's just better to have it later. Always, for every team. That to me is static.
I think the negatives of it outweigh the positives, but I do think there is a silver lining in that you do have the coordinators, and it might be a week for them to, assess.
Yeah, but and Nick has talked from that standpoint because there's self-scouting. Typically in a bye week, the sample size isn't large enough to do anything meaningful from a self-scouting standpoint.
Yeah, true.
So I don't like early buys for any team in any city at any time. And I think everybody's on board with that same sentiment. Nobody would like an early buy.
Agreed. Let's get to our commercial break. We'll have about a couple minutes left to play on Birds 365 when we get back. And then Dan Cilio coming up at 10 a.m. Thanks, everybody, for being here. Stay tuned. Birds 365. We'll be right back.
If you missed any of today's show on the JAKIB Media channel, listen to the podcast on your way home. Available on YouTube, Apple, and Spotify.